Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asuk b'divrei Torah. Varivna Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratcha b'finu v'yimcha beit Yisrael. V'niyeh anachnu v'tzeitzeinu v'tzeitzeimcha beit Yisrael kulanu yodei shemecha l'mdei Toratech l'shma. Baruch atah Adonai l'mei Torah l'amo Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'chabanu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Okay, it's recording.
Okay. All right. We're dealing on 24a1. Okay, let me just see if my screen's okay. Okay, sorry guys.
No problem.
All right, 24a1. Can you see me? Yeah. All right. So basically how we ended off yesterday is we're saying it's very, very simple. Rabbi Meir would turn around to them and say, look, it states, and this shall be his tumah when he discharges. Scripture has made the zav dependent on discharges, but the zava on days. So that would be his response to them saying that it demonstrates the fallacy of the kol v'chomer. So then the Gemara questions the last exposition and says, how do you know that this expression, v'zot, and this, comes to exclude a zava from assuming that status through discharges alone? Say rather that it comes to exclude a zav from assuming that status through discharges on separate days. Okay, so what is it actually saying here? It's saying perhaps in this means that this is the only way one can become a zav, through closely spaced discharges. But one does not become a zav in the manner of zavar through discharges on successive days. So, in other words, what will disprove his kol v'chomer anyway would be a case of if it said that the male zav cannot become impure through a seminal emission over a number of days. The reason being is that Rabbi Meir agrees with Rabbi Yehuda. He said, yes, I agree that if on 3 separate days an animal can become muad, obviously in 3 goring incidents within the same day, even more so it can become muad. So what it's saying is here, another way to break your kol v'chomer would be if the male zav itself could only become a zav through a closely time intervaled emissions, seminal emissions. But if he couldn't become a zav, if it happened on successive days, that wouldn't prove his kol v'chomer either, Rav Meir's, because it would say there wouldn't be more intensity within a shorter period of time, because there's no parameters for having seminal emissions over 3 successive days. So either way, it would seem to break the kol v'chomer. So we want to know his response as far as that's concerned. Okay, I'm sure I'm making sense to what I'm saying here. Does everybody understand? Guys, do you want to unmute yourself?
Can you just repeat that for us?
Okay.
What you just said.
With pleasure, with the greatest of pleasure. I'm just going to share my screen and this will make sense to you. Okay. So, Kev, what it's saying is as follows, is you can see here it says that an animal becomes muad if it has done the event on 3 separate days. It also reverts to being a tam when it desists from some behavior, the same behavior on 3 separate days. That's Rav Yehuda. So Rabbi Meir said a muad is an animal that they've testified about it, what's done 3 times. And it reverts being back to a tam anytime children poke at it and it does not go. So we want to ask, what's this kol v'chomer that Rabbi Meir is saying? He's saying if on 3 separate days it basically forms the habitual pattern of the animal, so too at shorter space events where 3 of the gorings occur even in one day, it proves that even more intensely that a habit is formed. And then what happened here is the rabbis responded and said, no, if you look at how a habit is formed, if we bring the rule of the zavar, the female zav, we see that it's not true, because at shorter space intervals, she's a zavar katana, which means a minor zava, And if she has one clean day after 1 or 2 impure days, she can become ritually clean after immersing in a mikveh. But if she has 3 days at which, she has had any sort of blood emission from the uterine, so in the uterus, in that particular case, she's a zava gedolah, which means a big zava, which means she has to then obviously bring bird offerings. She has to go to the mikveh and have wait another full day, another full period of time, as though she was going into the niddah process. Does that make sense? So what they've done is they've shown with the zava that this breaks the kol v'chomer from Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Meir responds as follows. Is that, listen, we're talking here about a male zav. Why are we talking about a male zav and not a zava? Because he said we can equally bring the argument that a male zav becomes impure on 3 discharges alone, even if it happens in a shortly spaced period, such as 1 day. So, that was the argument, at which then the Gemara responded. And it's saying that what about the phrase "and this"? So this phrase "and this" is an exclusionary term. And that exclusionary term proves their particular case. Okay? So what it's saying is, how do you know this expression "and this" comes to exclude a zava from assuming that status through discharges alone? Say rather that it comes to exclude a zav from assuming that status through 3 discharges on separate days. So the Gemara answers, the verse states, and concerning one who has a discharge, whether a male or a female. So the Torah thereby compares a male zav to a female zava. Just as a female zava becomes tamei through discharges experienced on 3 consecutive days, so too a male zav becomes tamei through discharges experienced on 3 consecutive days. That's what they're proposing. And the Gemara asks, let us compare a female zava to a male zav as well, and arrive maybe at the following conclusion. Just as a male zav becomes tama through several discharges, even on the same day, so too maybe a female zava becomes tamei through 3 discharges, even on the same day. So the Gemara answers, that cannot be. For the merciful one in this Torah has stated the exclusionary term "and this," which, as explained above, serves to restrict the conditions of the female zava to 3 days stated in her passage. Okay. So what it's basically saying here is that there's a special verse "and this," which comes to obviously only talk about female zava, as stating that it has to be on consecutive days. So we establishing pattern through a number of days over a longer period, and it excludes a male zav, which talks about habit forming within 3 particular discharges alone, even on the same day. So Rabbi Meir says that this doesn't, the term v'zot and this doesn't actually break his kol v'chomer at all. Because, you would have assumed that habit actually does occur at shorter intervals, and without the biblical scriptural verse to say v'zot and this, we would naturally come to this conclusion. It's only because there's a special scriptural verse that says with the female zava that it has to do with the number of days as opposed to the number of occurrences, that in fact we learn that there's a special case with regards to the female zava. So he was saying the whole reason you needed a scriptural verse is because logic would tell you more intense closely spaced patterns do form a stronger pattern than over a period of time. So makol v'chomer still stands. And the whole reason you have a biblical mentioning of v'zot and this is because your logic would have come to my conclusion. That's why you needed a specific verse to say that there's an exception in the case of zava. You see what I'm saying? So the arguments are going backwards and forwards. Okay? Now, all we are saying is that Perhaps the only way that one can become a zav is through closely spaced discharges, but one does not become a zav in the manner of zava through discharges on successive days. So this is the question. So this entire verse that I read to you in Leviticus chapter 15, verse 33 yesterday, goes through the biblical ordinance of this. So what it's saying here is we don't know, when you're doing a scriptural comparison between the zav and the zava, which is the source law and which is the target. So we're saying, how do we know then that the scripture means to apply only the laws of the female zava to a male zav? Perhaps it means to apply the law of the male zav to the female zava. So what is it saying here? It says, why not interpret and this as excluding a male zav from assuming that status through the number of days? You are then free to interpret the comparison as teaching that the law of the male zav, in other words, closely spaced discharges, applies to the female zava as well. So that's the question that it actually wants to put forward there. And it says it can't be. For the merciful one in his Torah has stated the exclusionary term, and this, which only applies to the conditions of the female zava, to 3 dates in her passage, in a menstrual passage. So the Gemara now says, okay, so what compelling reason do you see to construe the verse this way around instead of the other way around? In other words, we don't know whether to apply the number of discharges or number of days to the male zav, or how does it work? So the Gemara answers, it is more reasonable to say that when the verse deals with discharges, it excludes discharges. But is it reasonable to say that when it deals with discharges, it excludes days rather than discharges? Certainly not. So this is what it's actually coming to say.
Cheers.
Cheers, Kevin.
Cheers.
All right. So Kevin will catch up. So this is what it's coming to say. It says, like, when there's a biblical verse that has a limiting expression found in the context, what it's coming to mean is it's coming to tell you the parameters of the very subject being discussed. So if the expression vizot, and this opens a verse that details the attainment of a zav status through discharges alone, we then can construe that the expression is limiting to the law of discharges alone, to the context of the male zav. We don't instead extrapolate from that the expression is teaching another law, namely that the days of the zava does not apply here. So all it's saying, Gav, all it's saying, Art, is that you can't take the laws of zava in terms of the number of days and apply to the law of zav. Because when we're talking about zav, and this, it's saying only within the context of a male zav it's working on discharges. And then when you're learning zava separately in terms of successive number of days, it's only then that we're establishing the female pattern according to the merciful one scriptural verse. So that's all it's saying. Now I'm going to test you guys. Arthur, what are we saying here? What's this whole thing? Tell me what you understand.
From what I understand is you're determining the difference between the male and female zav, basically, at the moment. But
Okay.
how many days in between, you've got to keep a full day before you can... No, that's what I'm understanding.
Can you be specific?
Well, I'm trying to be specific. I'm not...
No. I want specificity. Specific. Okay, can I ask you a question? Maybe this will help. Give me the parameters. Firstly, the male you must refer to as zav, and the female zavat. Make it easy.
I know.
Okay, so what's the rule of the zav and what's the rule of the zava?
Well, okay, with the female, wait, you mentioned earlier. Hold on, I've got to go back a second now in my head. You were talking about if it's a zav katana, a small one. Okay.
No, zava katana.
Zava katana. Sorry, zava katana, which is a female. Okay.
Yeah.
She has to wait a full day between, and then she can go to the mikvah and purify herself. If it's a zava gadola, she has to wait. I think you said 2 days there, something like that.
7.
Sorry, 7 days, and then up to 11 days, if I'm not correct.
No.
It's 7
What
days.
happens is after you hit on the 11 days correctly. So just to clarify one thing, you have a 7-day, what you call the niddah period.
Yeah.
After that, you've got 11 clean days, providing there's not successive days of uterine blood. So after the 7 days, you go to the mikveh, and if the female zava notices any blood, if she has blood on one day, it's okay. She has to wait one clean day and then go to the mikveh. If she has 2 days of uterine blood discharge, it's okay. After one clean day, she can go to the mikveh. But if she has 3 days of blood, she's now zava gedolah, where she has to then wait for. She has to then obviously wait for another 7 days, and if she is clean, go to the mikveh and bring a bird offering. So what are we trying to, what is the males up? The reason I'm asking Arthur, Gav, is I just want to give Arthur a chance just to see if he...
thanks. That's so generous of you.
No, 100%.
You know how I've been...
100%. Looks like he doesn't have enough pressure in life. So
yeah, no, it's cool. Okay.
And with the males up?
24 hours? I'm just guessing. I know the female one because I go in the house. The male one, I don't know.
Okay, but from what we learned for the last few days, that you were concentrating on hearing.
Okay, there was basically from what I understood, it's going to be on. No, but that's for a woman. It's not for a man. So I'm thinking of the 3 consecutive days. I don't know why that's coming on, but that's for Muad. What am I talking about? It's a different thing. Sorry. I don't know much about the male. I mean, I know a male, but I don't know much about me.
All right. So what I'm saying is, everything I'm testing you on is things that we're discussing here, which means you seem to be switching off because, and I'm not that interesting, but I'm only testing you on things we've gone through here. And the reason I'm not asking Gavin is because I need to just concentrate on Arthur for a sec. I know you know it. Because there's no such thing as a free shear or free lunch.
Yeah, there's 40 minutes gone forever, I've got to say at the moment. It feels like it's gone on for an hour.
No, I know, because you're in the hot seat. But let me just tell you why we're bringing this up. Because we want to establish, I need you to just know a couple of bullet points, and I'm happy. The first thing that you need to do is to say, well, why are we learning all of this? Whenever you're learning Gemara, this is one thing I was showing you in Israel. The first thing you learn is, why are we doing this? And the reason is we see Rabbi Yehuda saying an animal becomes muad after 3 separate days. And basically Rabbi Meir said, you become muad, the animal becomes muad if it occurs 3 times. So they're arguing what establishes a pattern. Is it the longer the issue transpires over, that establishes a pattern, or does it establish a pattern on intensity? Does that make sense? That's the argument. Okay, when you understand the argument, just repeat it to me.
So the argument, I mean, I understood about the Tam one, that I understood. Okay.
No. This whole argument is how something becomes muad. Before
muad, where it goes either through the one rabbi saying, which I can't remember names, is
Rabbi Yehuda.
Rabbi Yehuda is saying that if it happens on, is that three separate days on that one, or is it the three separate days with it, then it can, then it works. Or reverts back to it becomes muad. Okay.
Excellent.
Okay. And the other guy's saying no, if it happens 3 times, anytime, whether it's on the same day or different days, okay, as long as 3 consecutive days, he becomes muad. The time frame is reduced.
No, the last statement was a bit problematic. You would talk about 3 times in 3 separate days.
No. Again, I'm saying whether it happens 3 times in a row.
Correct.
Okay, no matter what the time span is. So
Correct.
So if it's
So
like
there's only three times you have to,
3 times in an hour is more, 3 times in a day is more, 3 times in 3 days is more, as long as it's three consecutive times.
Excellent. So the first opinion, Rabbi Yehuda says it has to occur on 3 separate days. He establishes a pattern, a habitual pattern over a longer period of time because people can have an off day and they're very aggressive in one day. Their blood sugars are low, they don't get enough sleep. But he would say pattern is established if you see it over a period of time of 3 separate days. Rabbi Meir, M-E-I-R, says that a pattern is established 3 separate times. It doesn't work on days, and in fact, he said he's not disagreeing with Rabbi Yehuda. If an animal does it on 3 separate days, well, then his 3 times rule is still qualified. But he's saying even more than that, that if it occurs even in one day, the animal in that particular case is muad. And then the Gemara, this a very simple argument, comes to say, we don't see a pattern as established like that, because if you look at the female Bava, we need to know that it's something very different that occurs with her. This is a proof of highly established pattern. So Zava is a woman who discharges uterine blood during the 11 days following a 7-day niddah period of normal menstruation. If during this 11-day period she discharges blood on just 1 or 2 consecutive days, she is tameh, impure, but she can immerse herself in a mikveh to become tahor, pure, after observing only 1 clean day. 1 day without any discharge of blood, in other words. So that's a minor zava. Is a woman who observes a day free of discharge against a day or 2 on which she discharges blood. However, if she discharges blood on 3 consecutive days during the 11 days of Ziva, she becomes a major Zava, and she must count 7 clean days before she may immerse herself, and she must bring a pair of bird offerings following her purification. So that's a simple rule. So that says the rabbis are bringing forward in the Gemara that this breaks the kol v'chomer of Rabbi Meir. Again, Rabbi Meir said, if on 3 separate days an animal's goring is muad because it establishes a pattern, when an animal does it more intensely over a shorter period, it even proves there's more of a habit because of the intensity in a shorter space of time. The rabbis are bringing the rule of the Zavat to say, no, it seems that patterns are established over a longer period of time because she's still considered a minor Zava if it's in, like there's a lot of blood discharges within a day or 2. She can still have 1 clean day and she's fine. So this just proves the kol v'chomer of Rabbi Meir. So then Rabbi Meir responds and he says, no, if you look at a male Zav, I can equally say that if a male Zav has 3 seminal discharges within 1 day or 3 discharges over a longer period, over 3 days, he's still, in that particular case, considered to be impure. So therefore, even if it happens 3 times in 1 day, is immediately considered impure. So it proves my kol v'chomer. So it was saying, you've got your zava, I've got my zava as a proof. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I noticed one thing, Dan, with the time thing, it goes throughout, because if you look at a person who's touched the dead person or something like that, there's always a day break that you have to have, a certain time span from to the next day. Correct. Before they can do anything else.
Correct. So that was Rabbi Meir's response. Now the Gemara wants to know, what are you going to do with this word v'zot? Because
what does v'zot mean?
V'zot means and this.
And this, okay.
So what are we saying with and this? Gav, I know this is a bit of chazorah for you, but I need you just to be a little patient with you. I'm so sorry, but this is important because Arthur is extremely bright. But this new subject for him, I'm lost at SEO, and that's his expertise. We all have an expertise. So what we're saying is this pattern and this is an exclusionary term. In other words, I say, Arthur, go and pick up this document for our business meeting on SEO. When I say in this, it means if there are 50 documents, I'm pointing to one document, which means it is focused on a particular selection. If I say this and that, it means or all of it. This means I'm choosing one thing in particular at the exclusion of everything else. So this word vazot seems to throw a little bit of a spanner in the works. And why does it throw a spanner in the works? Is because we don't know how this affects the kol v'chomer. Okay? So basically, it says, the merciful one in his Torah stated the exclusionary term endus, which serves to restrict the conditions of a female zav.
Hello?
It's frozen, huh?
Yeah. It's a cold subject.
I don't know. You got to take over, huh?
Okay, so like Damon was saying before he froze.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
I was about to do the shiur for you, Damon. You froze. I was taking over. I was explaining the whole thing. You missed it.
Yeah.
You have to watch the recording.
Jesus, he was fantastic. He summarized everything you said in about 30 seconds.
It's amazing.
Amazing.
So the
All right.
exclusionary term and this basically means that Hashem, the merciful one, made sure that the female Zaba has to deal with the habit forming pattern over a number of days. And he's saying that as far as the Zav's concerned, his period is on a number of successive times. So we don't know whether or not to apply the word vazot from the number of days to a male or to apply the number of times to a female. So the word vazot seems to make a distinction between the male zav and the female. That's a particular word. Why? Because if you're talking about discharges, then you're only talking about discharges. Because if you say you want to exclude certain things, you're not going to exclude things of a different subject matter. You're talking about what you're talking about. So the rabbis will say, well, this would throw the kol v'chomer off. And Rabbi Meir was saying, no, because logic will say my kol v'chomer is correct. The whole reason the merciful one mentions the word vazot is to make a special mention of the fact that a habit in the case of a zava is formed according to days. Otherwise, your natural logic would have said that if a habit occurs more intensely over a shorter period of time, my kol v'chomer still stands. So that's all I want you to understand. So, right, guys, we're on 24a4. Now, before I read the brisa, I want to explain the Mishnah. Okay, off?
Yeah.
So, we might, you and I, just edit the last few minutes of the previous shiur so that the recording is smooth. But it's very, very simple. Rabbi Yehuda says as follows: and from an animal to go from tame to aggressive, at which the owner is forewarned, in other words, it goes from tam to muad, it has to do the goring on 3 separate days. In order for it to revert being from aggressive to tame, it has to desist on such behavior on 3 separate days. So according to the Mishnah, it says, Rabbi Yehuda, that the same way that the animal has become aggressive is the same way it needs to become tame. Rabbi Meir has a different opinion. It says an animal goes from tame to aggressive if it does it 3 times. So whether it does it 3 times on 3 separate days or 3 times in 1 day, as long as it does it 3 times, the animal has now become from tame to aggressive, from tam to muad. And then when does an animal revert back from being muad, aggressive, to tame? When any time that children poke it between the horns, it does not gore. Now that's the Mishnah. It's as clear as day. Now a brisa comes. And it says the rabbis taught in a brisa. Okay? Which animal is a muad? Any animal that they've testified about it, that it does it on 3 separate days, and it reverts to being a tam when children poke it, and it does not gore. So these are the words of Rav Yose. So Rav Yose is seeming to say that an animal becomes muad when it does it on 3 separate days. So Rav Yose is agreeing with whom?
Rav Yehuda.
Rav Yehuda on how it becomes what? Muad.
Muad.
And he agrees with Rabbi Meir in terms of how it becomes time again. And it reverts to being a tam when children poke it and it does not go. So in other words, he agrees with Rabbi Yehuda in terms of how it becomes muad, aggressive, and he agrees with Rabbi Meir in terms of how it reverts from an aggressive state to being back tame. That's the words of Rav Yose. Fine. Rabbi Shimon has got a different way that he sees it. A muad is any animal that they have testified about it, what it has done 3 times. So who does Rabbi Shimon says that an animal becomes muad according to Gavin?
Rabbi Meir.
Exactly.
Meir.
Rabbi Meir or Meir, I'm sure it's fine. It's the same. So Rabbi Shimon basically said that an animal becomes muad if it does it 3 times. So he's agreeing with Rabbi Meir in terms of how that occurs. But in regarding how it becomes tame, he agrees with Rav Yehuda. He says, and they mention 3 days only in regard to reversion back to being a tam. Okay, this is all pretty clear. So we're learning from here that it's not either or. There's some rabbis that agree with a tam or muad statement according to the Mishnah, according to one or the other opinion. And you can mix it up. We can't, but they can because they understood the full spectrum. So now the Gemara is going to present its ruling in this matter. Rav Nachman said in the name of Rav Ada bar Ahava. The halacha follows Rav Yehuda in regard to muad, since Rav Yose agrees with him. And the halacha follows Rav Meir in regard to tam, since Rav Yose agrees with him. Okay? So the response is questioned. Rava says to Rav Nachman, but let the master say instead that the halacha follows Rabbi Meir in regard to muad, since Rabbi Shimon agrees with him, and that the halacha follow Rabbi Yehuda in regard to tam, since Rabbi Shimon agrees with him. So now there's a discussion between Rava and Rav Nachman. So Rava agrees with Rav Shimon, and Rav Nachman agrees with Rav Yose. Okay? Does that make sense? So Rav Nachman replies to Rava, I hold as Rav Yose does, because Rav Yose always has his reasons with him. What does this mean? It means as follows. In the Gemara Gittin 67a, Rav Yose is praised for always having his reasons with him. That is, he always provides a clear explanation of his proofs and of his impeccable logic. Okay. Any questions, guys?
No.
All right. Now, I'm going to be kind on you guys. I'm not going to ask you to explain this back on me because I know we've all got a business day to attend to. And I can see a breathing sigh of relief from all of you.